Relief fantasies. You catch yourself daydreaming about being single, and instead of feeling sad or guilty, you feel lighter. Not fantasizing about other people or wild adventures, just imagining your regular life without them in it and feeling this quiet sense of peace wash over you. Maybe you're stuck in traffic thinking about what life would look like if you came home to an empty apartment and your chest unclenches. That's your subconscious waving a massive red flag. What makes this so telling is the emotional quality of these thoughts. When you're in a healthy relationship going through a rough patch, imagining a breakup feels painful, even if you're frustrated. But when the relationship is truly over in your heart, those thoughts feel like relief, like imagining the end of something exhausting rather than something precious. Your nervous system is basically telling you it's tired of being in survival mode. This happens because prolonged relationship stress keeps your body in a state of chronic activation. When you imagine being alone, your nervous system gets a break from that constant low-level anxiety. The relief you feel isn't about freedom to do whatever you want. It's about freedom from the emotional labor of maintaining something that's already dead. And here's the brutal part. Once you start feeling relief instead of loss when you picture the end, you've already emotionally left. You're just still physically there. Selective amnesia. You struggle to remember why you fell in love with them in the first place. Not because it's been too long, but because your brain has actively started erasing or rewriting positive memories. You can recall every argument, every disappointment, every moment they let you down with crystal clarity. But the good times feel distant, blurry, almost like they happened to someone else or maybe didn't happen at all. This is your brain protecting you, preparing you for separation by severing emotional attachment. It's the same mechanism that helps people process grief and move on after loss. Your mind is essentially pre-grieving the relationship by making it easier to let go. Psychologists call this emotional detachment, and it's one of the most reliable indicators that someone has mentally checked out. The relationship might still exist on paper, but emotionally, you've already rewritten the story with a different ending. What's happening neurologically is fascinating and kind of sad. Your brain isn't deleting memories, it's changing how you access them. The emotional tags attached to positive experiences get dampened while negative ones get amplified. So that amazing vacation where you laughed until your stomach hurt, your brain now files it under waste of time or already felt wrong then. You're not lying to yourself. You're being protected from the pain of leaving something that once meant everything. Phantom partner. You've started living separate lives under the same roof or relationship label, making plans without thinking to include them, going to concerts alone, having entire experiences and whole conversations without mentioning them. And it's not because you're fighting or being spiteful, you just genuinely forget they're supposed to be part of your life, like they've become a ghost in your daily existence. This is different from healthy independence. In a solid relationship, you choose to do some things separately because you value your individuality. But you still think of your partner, consider their schedule, maybe mention your plans. When the relationship is over, they've become irrelevant to your decision-making process, not through conscious exclusion, but through unconscious erasure. They're just not in the equation anymore when you're planning your life. The scary part about this phantom partner phase is how gradually it happens. First, you stop asking if they want to join you for small things, then bigger things. Eventually, you're making major life decisions without their input, because on some level, you know they won't be around for the outcome. You've started treating them like a roommate you're polite to rather than a partner you're building a life with. And the relationship continues in this weird limbo where you're together in name only. Emotional flatline. They walk into the room and you feel absolutely nothing. No happiness, no annoyance, no butterflies, no dread. Just flat neutrality, like they're a piece of furniture you've gotten used to seeing. They could tell you they got a promotion or lost their job and your emotional response would be roughly the same. Polite acknowledgement with zero internal reaction. People think the opposite of love is hate, but it's actually indifference. Anger, frustration, even resentment still require emotional investment. They mean you care enough to have feelings about the situation. But when you hit a true emotional flatline, you've crossed into territory where the relationship is essentially over. Your heart has stopped participating even if your body is still showing up. This numbness is your psyche's way of shutting down to protect itself from prolonged stress or disappointment. After months or years of unmet needs, unfulfilled promises, or emotional neglect, your brain just stops producing the chemicals associated with attachment and connection to that person. It's like your internal system has decided that investing energy in this relationship is no longer worth the cost. And once you've gone numb, it's nearly impossible to come back from. You can't force yourself to care about someone your nervous system has decided to emotionally divorce. Strategic silence. You've stopped bringing up issues entirely, and it's not because things got better. You've just stopped caring if they change. You notice something that would have sparked a 2-hour conversation or massive argument 6 months ago, and now you just mentally shrug and move on. Not because you're being mature or picking your battles, because the outcome genuinely doesn't matter to you anymore. This is what therapists call the death of hope. When you're invested in a relationship, you fight. You bring things up. You try to fix problems because you believe change is possible and worth pursuing. But when you've given up, you stop fighting altogether. The silent acceptance of unacceptable behavior isn't peace, it's surrender. You've internally accepted that this person isn't going to meet your needs, so you've stopped asking them to try. What makes this particularly painful is that, from the outside, it can look like the relationship is improving. Fewer fights, less tension, more surface-level calm. But that calm is hollow. You're not fighting because you're building an exit strategy in your head, consciously or not. You're preserving your energy for the eventual separation rather than wasting it on someone you've already decided isn't going to be in your future. The relationship becomes this weird performance where you're both going through motions while completely disconnected. By the way, if you're finding this helpful, I post content like this regularly. I'd appreciate it if you subscribed. Thanks. Identity reclamation. You start reconnecting with parts of yourself that disappeared during the relationship. Maybe you're listening to music they didn't like, eating foods they complained about, or reviving interests you'd abandoned to accommodate their preferences. It's not rebellion or spite. It's your authentic self slowly emerging from hibernation, and it feels like breathing again after holding your breath for months. This identity reclamation happens because healthy relationships should expand your sense of self, not shrink it. When a relationship is dying, people often report feeling like they've lost themselves or become a smaller version of who they were. Research on self-expansion theory shows that relationships thrive when partners help each other grow and explore new aspects of themselves. But when that stops happening, or worse, when one partner actively discourages the other's interests and preferences, the suppressed self eventually demands recognition. What makes this sign particularly telling is the emotional quality that comes with reclaiming yourself. There's relief, almost like reuniting with an old friend you'd forgotten about. You remember you actually loved spending Saturday mornings reading at coffee shops, or that you used to paint, or that you're naturally more introverted than you've been pretending to be. And the more you reconnect with your authentic self, the more obvious it becomes that this relationship requires you to be someone you're not. Once you start choosing yourself over the relationship consistently, you've already made your decision about which one matters more. Storytelling shift. The way you talk about your relationship has changed, and not just to close friends, but in your own head. You've stopped saying we and started saying I or they. When people ask about your weekend or your plans, you instinctively answer as an individual rather than as part of a couple. You're narrating your life as a solo story that happens to have another person in it sometimes, not as a shared story you're building together. This linguistic shift matters more than it seems. Language researchers have found that couples who use more plural pronouns like we, us, and our tend to have stronger relationships and better conflict resolution. When people start defaulting back to singular pronouns, it signals psychological separation. Your brain is already rewriting the narrative of your life to position yourself as the protagonist and them as a supporting character who might exit at any moment. The storytelling shift extends beyond pronouns to how you frame your relationship history. You might catch yourself explaining your relationship to new acquaintances with qualifiers and distance, almost like you're describing someone else's life. Or you start mentally editing them out of stories about your past, remembering events as things you did rather than things you did together. This narrative restructuring is your mind's way of preparing for a future where this relationship is just a chapter in your story, not the story itself. And once you've started telling your story without them as a central character, you've already begun the psychological process of separation. Escape architecture. You've unconsciously started building a life that doesn't require them. Reconnecting with college friends you haven't seen in years, developing new hobbies, creating a social circle that exists separately from your relationship, not because you're being unfaithful or consciously planning to leave, but because some part of you knows you need to be okay on your own. This exit behavior is your survival instinct kicking in. You're creating the emotional and social infrastructure you'll need post-breakup without consciously acknowledging that's what you're doing. It's like your subconscious is running a background program, preparing for a future that your conscious mind hasn't fully accepted yet. And while building independence in a relationship can be healthy, this is different. This is building a completely separate life. The telltale sign is that these new aspects of your life feel more energizing than anything you do with your partner. You're excited about your Thursday night pottery class in a way you haven't been excited about date night in months. Your weekend plans with friends feel like relief rather than supplementing your relationship. You've essentially created an escape hatch without calling it that. And the more you invest in this separate life, the easier it becomes to imagine it as your only life. Private mourning. You've already done the emotional work of processing the breakup in your head. You've imagined the conversation dozens of times, pictured your life after, felt the sadness, and worked through it mentally. By the time you actually have the breakup talk, you're weirdly calm because you've already grieved this relationship privately over the past few months. This internal grieving process is why some people seem fine immediately after a breakup while their partner is devastated. It's not that they care less. It's that they had a 3-month head start on processing the loss. While you were still trying to make it work, they were already in the acceptance phase of grief. They cried their tears alone at 3 in the morning. They worked through the anger and bargaining in their own head. By the time they tell you it's over, they're already healing. The hardest part about private mourning is the isolation. You're mourning a relationship that technically still exists, which means you're doing it alone. You can't talk to your partner about it because that would force the conversation you're not ready to have. You can't really talk to friends because explaining that you're sad about a relationship you're still in sounds confusing. So you carry this private grief, showing up to your relationship like everything's normal while internally you're already saying goodbye. Autopilot mode. You're going through the motions of being in a relationship purely out of guilt, fear, or obligation, texting good morning because you're supposed to, having sex occasionally because it's expected, celebrating your anniversary because not doing so would require a conversation you're avoiding. Every interaction feels like you're playing a role in a movie rather than being genuine. This performance is exhausting because it requires constant self-monitoring. You have to remember to act like someone in love when you feel nothing. You have to manufacture enthusiasm for plans and affection for moments. And the longer you keep performing, the more disconnected you become from your own feelings. You start to doubt whether what you're experiencing is real or if you're just being dramatic, but the fact that you're asking yourself if you're faking your relationship is usually the answer. What makes this particularly painful is the guilt. You know they don't deserve to be with someone who's emotionally checked out. You know you're being unfair by staying when you've already left in your heart. But the thought of having the breakup conversation feels impossible, so you keep performing, thinking maybe you'll feel something again if you just try hard enough. You won't. Once you've gotten to the point where your relationship is a part you're playing rather than a life you're living, it's over. You just haven't admitted it yet. If this resonated with you, consider subscribing so you don't miss future uploads. Thanks for watching.